dump or don't say a word. Move my head around like a startled bird. Can't do housework when I choose. When I win, I convince myself I lose. Fabric feels weird against my skin. I gotta hold my breath when I take out the bin. Can't go out cause it's too hot and bright. I can't sleep at night cause there's too much light. The bees in my brain won't let me speak. My thought process is quite unique. The mask comes off and now I'm weird. Everything is as I feared. Living in this world can be quite a chore. We've all had enough, but we still want more. Leave me alone, I don't want interference. Wait, no, mate, that's your autistic experience.
Hello and welcome to the Autistic Experience, your one-stop shop for neurodivergent news, commentary, and general weirdness, courtesy of us. New episodes come out every Sunday at midday British time, and you can also go follow us on Instagram at The Autistic Experience for updates, posts. You know what goes on Instagram, those sorts of things. My name is Kieran, as always joined by Chloe.
You are indeed.
Oh, good. You know, sometimes. Never really know sometimes. So, as always, we're going to be looking at some of the news stories that have caught our eye in the last week. Then we're going to be going over to our internet corner to try and find some poor soul in need of advice. And then, of course, we're going to finish off by going over some of the events coming up in the next week. So, stuff to look forward to. But first, of course, it's the dreaded home life segment. It's got to happen. It's got to happen. Right, so the last week, what have we done?
I don't think a lot, to be honest with you.
It's been a fairly quiet week after last one.
Yeah, a bit of gaming.
Yeah, it's been a lot of that going on.
There's been a bit of chaos today, hasn't there? But
Yeah.
I think that's more relevant for next week. So
Well, we can look forward to it because that's gonna be a thing.
that will be an interesting one to talk about. Yeah, but basically, I signed up for a thing. I'm not going to say what thing it is. You have to wait till next week for that. And due to various factors and events, Kieran has been pulled into this thing.
Yes.
Unintentionally, and it should be quite funny, but it's caused me a hell of a lot of stress today.
Yeah.
Because I've been trying to sort various issues that are not my job to sort, as I do all the time.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about that a little bit in terms of your kind of like need to try and fix everything or take it upon yourself to be responsible for everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, I think that's probably quite common, isn't it, with neurodivergent people? Is it?
I think it's probably the need for order and stability.
Well, that's what I was
Coming into
thinking, really,
practice.
is like, it's more of a, I'm not in control of this thing, and I don't like that. And also an element of, I feel kind of like a problem because something else is going wrong, but I'm involved in it. Do you know what I mean?
In that situation, you're the only thing that's not a problem.
I know, but it's like I'm involved in this and there is an issue and I feel responsible for it in a way. And if I can't resolve it, it's like, it's my fault. So there's a few reasons, but I do think the lack of control is the biggest thing. I'm like, I want to solve this and I want to be in control of it, but I can't. I have to just be patient and let somebody else deal with it when they can't necessarily deal with it immediately. That's really hard.
Yeah. As we said, it's the kind of need for stability. I wouldn't say control because that's quite self-serving. It's just the need for everything to be predictable and planned out and ready to go. So usually, you know, in my experience anyway, we want to achieve that stability, even if it means putting the brunt of work on ourselves.
Yeah.
So it happens all the time, like in school and university, like group work. The number of times we end up basically doing everything because people don't seem to be doing what they should be doing. Then we're like, okay, I'll do that, I'll do that, I'll do that. And like, even just to our standards, because like, I don't know about you, but I was always fully aware in group work that my standards were a lot higher than most other people's.
Yeah.
So if they were to hand in the work as they were happy with, it's not the level I would be happy with, and my grade gets pulled down because of them.
Yeah. I'm very reluctant to let somebody else's lack of effort, I suppose, to impact my results.
Yeah, because I think, weirdly enough, thinking about it now, I've spent, well, my entire life not being able to kind of say that I'm like good at things.
Yeah.
Right? The only way I can present my ability is through the work I put out.
Yeah.
So I don't talk and wax lyrical about like achievements and like my abilities. It's like my work speaks for itself. And if my work is clouded by what other people do, then it makes me look less capable.
Yeah.
And I can't like talk my way through a substandard bit of work nearly as well as some other people can.
Yeah.
So if I've got like this really good bit of work that I can show off, that should be able to do the talking for me.
Yeah.
But if I don't have that, then I'm kind of screwed.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I've never been one for that. I don't like seeming like I'm showing off. So if somebody asks about something, then I'll talk about it. But if nobody asks, then nobody will ever know that I've done the various things that I've done in my life. And I get very underestimated for that, I think. Because people don't know half the stuff I've done.
But yeah, see, otherwise, in the last couple of days, we've been playing a new game called Moonstone Island.
Yes.
Which is a very cute, cozy life sim, but you're kind of like an alchemist and you're brewing chemicals and you're going on little islands, and kind of it's a cross between like Stardew Valley and Pokemon.
Yeah.
It's the easiest way to describe it.
Yeah, it's very cute and it's very relaxing and it's very addictive.
And the developers have put a lot of effort into making it representative and inclusive. So there are lots of like non-binary characters in there.
Yeah.
With various different nationality backgrounds.
Yeah.
And some of the characters I've interacted with have kind of stood out to me and gone, yep, that's ADHD.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Have
like
have a good
that's
one.
some serious hyperfixation right there.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Have you got one, like one in particular that you can think of? Or
Well, we'll talk about it afterwards. Like, if you don't know what Moonstone Island is, then you may not be interested just to listen to an in-depth analysis of different characters.
Fair enough.
But for now, I think it's probably about time we move on to the Neurodivergent News segment. So, yes, we got 4 stories for you again this week. Also, I forgot to mention, it's the 1st of October, so happy ADHD Awareness Month.
Oh, I was going to say happy spooky times.
And also happy spooky times, yes. Wow. I mean, it does just go to show that occasionally different wavelengths of our brains.
I
Not
genuinely
often, but it
thought
does
that was
happen.
where you were going.
Not quite.
Happy spooky month.
It is spooky month, yes. But... And in honor of Spooky ADHD Awareness Month, our first story today comes from York in the UK. This is actually on itv.com, and it says, controversial York health pilots making it harder to get ADHD diagnosis. Yay, happy ADHD Awareness Month, folks. So, in March this year, the Humber and North Yorkshire Integrated Care Board apparently had 922 people waiting for an ADHD assessment, which initially doesn't sound like a lot, but this is just one fairly smallish health board. So what they did is they put on a little pilot trial system the idea is to try and get the people most at risk seen first. So they would get priority. So this was initially on a 3-month trial basis. So the idea was that only kind of these urgent cases would be referred, basically. So the criteria says that if you're at immediate risk of self-harm or harm to others, also, if you'd already had a mental health assessment and a crisis management plan already in place, if you were at risk of being unable to have planned life-saving hospital treatment, I'm not sure how that would necessarily apply to being ADHD, but...
I don't know.
Or if you're at imminent risk of family court decisions determined on a diagnosis. So, like, if everything was breaking down around you and you had some sort of court thing, and then, I don't know.
Like somehow getting diagnosed.
Yeah, so basically,
it all.
those are the criteria they put in place so that if you covered, I'm not even sure whether it's all of them or one of them or...
I seem to get the impression that it's like one. If you
Yeah.
meet one.
You'd be a right mess if you had all three right there. But yeah, okay, so let's say for the time being that if you have one of these, then you meet the criteria and you can get assessed. However, the issue with that, as you can probably imagine, means that anyone even slightly not in that group, if you're struggling with schoolwork, regular work, general life, like up to the point of not actually being able to do it, but not to the point of self-harm, then you're out of luck. Not happening.
Yeah.
And since the board has determined that to be a success, the pilot to be a success, they've extended it to last until March 2024. So if you are on the hunt for an ADHD diagnosis anywhere near York, too bad.
The thing is, like, I see what they're trying to do. It's good to get the people who are in that risk group seen quicker because they obviously need it. But the fact that you're not seeing anybody else, kind of like, are you just going to wait until everybody who's not currently in that risk group becomes part of that risk group? Like, are you going to ignore everyone else who thinks they have ADHD until they're self-harming and then say, oh yeah, we'll refer you now because you're at the point of being a risk to yourself or other people?
Yeah, it's
Like-
it's the case that they're trying to prioritize assessments, which I think most of us would say that's fair enough.
Yeah.
The people who need care first should get the care first.
Yeah.
But by doing so, they've excluded literally everyone else.
Yeah.
No matter how much they struggle or how much they need the help, unless they come under these three very restrictive criteria. But on this story, the York Disability Rights Forum has submitted a legal letter to that care board calling for the immediate suspension of that pilot because they said that they are, to quote, very concerned at the restriction of access to diagnosis and support for the vast majority of neurodivergent adults in York and North Yorkshire.
Which is fair.
And then just on the statistics side of things, the watchdog Health Watch York says that 126 out of 1,200 people who wanted an assessment got one.
Damn.
10% met the criteria.
That's a lot of people to exclude.
Yeah. You're basically being denied healthcare,
Yeah.
is what's going on. Okay, our second piece we're looking at today is actually kind of an opinion piece from Scientific American. It's a bit of a long read. Well, maybe 5 minutes if you concentrate.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this one was written by Steve Silberman on the 25th of September. It's entitled Autism, Human Connection and the Double Empathy Problem. As with all the other stories and everything we talk about today, we're going to put our references up on the Instagram page at The Autistic Experience, so you can track them down yourself and have a read and just make sure we're not making it up. So this does make some very interesting because it kind of makes the argument that stereotypically us autistic people don't seek out like meaningful relationships or friendships.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just not true. I mean, I think, we all like the idea of having friends
Yeah.
or like having relationships. They're difficult, but not necessarily for the reasons you might think. So what this article is trying to kind of put across is that it's not just on us, that relationships and friendships just don't easily form. Friendships are a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
So if us trying to, be friendly with someone else, that can seem different and a bit weird because, that's how our brains work. That's how we process things. And if a neurotypical person sees that, they go, well, that's strange. I'm not going to try.
Yeah.
Because it's the case that we always seem weird when we're with new people
Yeah.
because we're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
As soon as, we find someone who's willing to put a bit of time and effort into being a decent human, then we feel a lot more comfortable,
Yeah.
don't we?
I very much agree with the points that were made in this one, and I relate to them quite a lot. I quite often saw myself as like one of these people that had, 50 friends and was like a crazy social life, and I've just never been able to do it. And I didn't understand why for quite a long time, but that article pretty much sums it
Yeah.
up.
Well, I found a little bit I think you might be referring to, which says, when difficulties in a relationship arise, which autistic women, they tend to either assume they are entirely to blame for the problem and do whatever they can to resolve it, or assume that the friendship cannot be rescued and so withdraw from the relationship.
Yeah, there's definitely been times where I've just kind of quit on a friendship because I've thought, oh, well, it's beyond rectifying now, they don't care. But then, like, when we do make friends, we tend to have very few friends. Like, I've only got a few friends, but, the friends we do have tend to be quite close.
Yeah, because I think one of the things we want in friendships is closeness.
Yeah.
Because it's only with people we feel close to and can trust that we can be ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we can't be ourselves, then what's the point?
Yeah. Otherwise, if you're not that close to somebody, I think it's quite easy to feel judged.
Yeah.
And that's when you're more likely to distance yourself from it.
I would advise you to go and have a look at this article. It's on Scientific American. Again, we'll put the reference up because it makes its own arguments much better than we can paraphrase them. Put it that way. It's only a couple of minutes, but there's quite a lot of other links in there to other articles, so you can go down a whole rabbit hole of research on this one. So good luck to you. Our third story tonight comes from the Northern Echo, which is, again, up north in England. It's a local paper as far as I can tell. So the headline, this came out on the 28th of September, is Durham MP Mary Kelly Foy hits out at neurodivergence assessment weight. So the basic premise of this article is that the MP for County Durham, her son, who is in his 30s, has recently been diagnosed with ADHD, and that she's kind of hit out against the system because the waiting time is completely bananas. The thing I wanted to kind of talk about with this article is not necessarily the content, it's how it's presented.
Mm-hmm.
It is a bit of a pattern in recent times that, depending on who's writing it, if they don't know a lot about different neurodivergences, they tend to want to try and clump them all together to try and be, politically correct.
Yeah.
So they say, he's been diagnosed with a neurodivergence. It's like, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Like, we say neurodivergent just to be inclusive, and like, we know that, as we mentioned last week, our brains are little archipelagos of weirdness. Go and listen to last week's episode for the actual context of that. But like the way some of this is written just screams, I don't really understand any of this myself.
Yeah.
Because one sentence this person's written, it says, in her speech, she outlined the challenges that people with autism and neurodivergence face in education, blah, 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 blah. Right? You don't have neurodivergence.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, it's personal preference as to whether you want to say you have autism or you are autistic. That's kind of personal preference at the moment. But you don't have a neurodivergence.
Yeah.
It's quite difficult to try and properly kind of put into words about why it shows a general non-understanding.
No, I know what you mean. Because it does say that it's a non-medical umbrella term that describes people with variation in their mental functions.
That sounds like it's just been Googled.
Yeah, sounds a bit weird.
The point I wanted to make looking at this article, and feel free just to have a look at it yourself on the Northern Echo website and, draw your own conclusions. But the thing I wanted to say is that it's very easy to spread not necessarily misinformation, but not totally accurate information.
Mm.
And if, as the person writing the article, if you don't quite understand what the information you're trying to put across is, then how do you think someone who also doesn't really know what it is will interpret that information?
Yeah.
Right? I read this article and it reads like the journalist has just gone to the speech and is just writing down the general idea. They put in a couple of buzzwords and they go, okay, send it off. And they don't really think anything further.
I don't know what you think as well, but having another read through it, it sort of comes across as autism and ADHD are. It seems like they just kind of bundle them all up into one thing, because it talks about that she's got another child that was born that has cerebral palsy, which is like a completely different thing to autism or ADHD. But at the end, there's a bit that talks about that, and it seems to kind of just bundle them all up into one thing. It's like they shouldn't be bundled up together. Because, they deserve their own sort of support, their own sort of education,
Also, it does say that it says waiting lists for neurological assessments have risen by 47% in a year to over 140,000 people in England. Now, we covered this a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
We found that it was over 143,000 people waiting for just an autism assessment. So, assuming that's what this article is referring to, but it says neurological assessment and just leaves it at that. And previously, they were talking about ADHD.
Mm.
So it seems like this person is kind of unknowingly just heaping being neurodivergent into just this one, as they say, umbrella term.
Yeah.
And just going, yep, it's all basically the same.
Yeah.
And that's not what we want to put out. Or, we don't want that information kind of going to the general population and just going, oh yeah, that's all basically the same, isn't it? Whereas no, it's not.
Yeah.
The one thing we want to try and take away from this is that if you see kind of these sorts of articles which cover autism and ADHD and other neurodivergences, as I found in my research, you've got to be really careful about which ones you give credence to. Because some are actually good and based in science. Some are just kind of half reporting something that the journalist vaguely has heard of.
Yeah.
And then some are just written with malice.
Yeah.
And depending on who reads them, that does affect them, because people, like the general population, just put news into one big, weirdly enough, umbrella. So all news has the same level of credibility.
Yeah.
That's just not true. So that's kind of one of the things we want to try and do, is point out where there's actually good and useful information to be found, and where sometimes it's not quite so good.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last story we're going to go for today is just a bit of a fun one. I found this list of, it says the 10 best Chrome extensions for people with ADHD. So we're not going to go through all of them because that would be very, very boring.
Yeah.
But if you want to have a look at it for yourself, again, it's going to go on our Instagram page, so you can find it yourself. The one that I actually two that I found useful, because a lot of them are just about being organized or tracking time, all that sort of thing. The first one I find useful is Bionic, or kind of ADHD reader. What it does is it emboldens like a couple of the first few letters of each word on like your web page, and then it kind of keeps your brain concentrating, because like sometimes when you have a big block of text, your brain just nopes right out of there.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not going to read that. I can't possibly. But by emboldening like the first couple of letters, it kind of gives it a bit more structure.
Yeah.
So it feels a lot nicer to read.
I've seen that before with making the first letters bold, being easier to read for ADHD brains, and I've always found it easier.
And then the second one, because I had a try with this one, it's called Noisely.
Oh, yeah.
You can pick like a different sounds with like rain or wind or thunder or leaves or kind of like forests and whatnot. You can just change the volume levels to make your own little soundscape to kind of provide a bit of noise just to help you focus, or just to provide a nice atmosphere.
That was another one that I liked as well, because I've always found it easier to focus with music playing. So I think having sound in the background is very important.
Yeah, I can't do music because I focus on the music. Again, the link to this list will go up onto our Instagram page at The Autistic Experience. Okay, let us move on to the middle portion of the show, which is trawling Reddit for personal problems.
Woo!
I found two. One is quite long, one is quite short. We're going to go for the shorter one. So this person says they're from the UK, so it's actually quite relevant to us as well. They say, my son is 16 and we are 99% certain he is on the spectrum, which obviously is shorthand for autistic. He is very keen to get an official diagnosis one way or the other, which I understand completely. My only question is, would this be an impediment in any way, for example, something that he has to declare on job applications, health screening, etc.? So, this is practical information, we can do this. So, as someone who has, in the last year, got my official diagnosis, it's something that you don't have to disclose in an application. In fact, it's probably best that you don't, because whilst various disability acts prevent employers from discriminating against you because you're autistic, it won't stop them, and they'll just pick any other reason to not process the application.
Yeah.
As we've seen, people don't know really anything about autism or ADHD, and they just see it as a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing you can do is not mention it on the application unless it's particularly relevant or beneficial.
Yeah.
And if you do end up getting the job, it's at that point you can bring it up, because at that point they've already hired you.
Yeah.
And it would be a lot easier to make the argument that they fired you because you're autistic if it's the one thing that's changed.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. However, there's a reason only 22% of autistic people are in any sort of work. Part of that is in the application, in that the way we answer questions is not the way they want them to be answered. We answer the questions that they ask.
Yeah.
The questions they ask are not the questions they want answered.
Yeah.
So if we make the mistake of answering the questions they ask, then they read it as not answering their secret question, right?
Yeah. I've got quite a good example for that.
Oh yeah, go for it.
I did an interview recently. One of the questions was, tell us about your experience. So obviously what I did was listed all the work experience I've ever had, with a few kind of extra details than what was on my CV.
Yeah.
I think what they actually wanted was any work experience that was very relevant to the position that I was applying for, and kind of how it was applicable to that position.
Yeah.
But because they said, tell us about your experience, that's what I did.
Yeah.
If they said, tell us about your experience that's relevant to the position and why it's relevant, then fine, I can do that.
Yeah. To cut a long story short, having an official diagnosis won't prevent you getting a job.
Hopefully.
Well, actually having the diagnosis shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because you're still going to be autistic whether you've got a diagnosis or not.
Yeah.
So you're still going to struggle with answering the questions. You're still going to struggle with the interview. You still may struggle with the actual job itself. But if you do have the diagnosis, then you know what's up.
Yeah.
And if you do get the job, as we said, then you can present that and go, ha.
Yeah.
No discrimination here, please. So yeah, that is our question of the week. We can call that, can't we?
Yeah.
That's not
Question of the
question of the week. We're slowly figuring out actual names for our
week. I like it.
different bits. So let's move on to next week's events. And as always, we've kind of just cherry picked some of the interesting sounding ones. So coming up on the 3rd of October, this one is in Doncaster. There is a social evening for adults with autism and other learning disabilities. So this is in Thorn, which I believe is probably some sort of suburb of Doncaster. Halfway between Doncaster and Scunthorpe. So, lovely place, I'm sure. So this is at the Thorn Democratic Club between 6 and 8 p.m. and apparently it's 50p
Sweet.
to attend.
Bargain.
Meanwhile, also on the 3rd, if you're in the West Midlands, or more specifically Chloe's neck of the woods.
The Black Country.
That's the one, yeah.
Black Country.
Autism West Midlands is doing a canoeing wellbeing meetup for autistic adults. So this one is free to go to, but you do need to have a Black Country postcode and also have a diagnosis of autism, or at least be on the path. It says be on the pathway to being diagnosed, which means on the waiting list. So you'd be able to go, Chloe, apart from the fact we don't have a Black Country
I don't have a Black
postcode.
Country postcode anymore.
No.
Sadly. Otherwise, I would totally go to Black Country autistic canoeing.
Yeah. That one is, as I said, free to go to between 12 and 3. If you go to autismwestmidlands.org.uk, the event will be on there. And there's an email you need to contact if you want to get involved with that. Next up, on Thursday, the 5th of October, this one's a ticketed one, so there is a slight cost to it, but it's in, where is it? Oh, this one's in Edinburgh. So if you're up Scotland direction, it's called ADHD in Women, Misunderstood, Misdiagnosed, and Moving Forward for Change. So this is a talk, as far as I understand. It's 2.5 hours long. Not necessarily amazing for attention spans, but apparently they're quite good, as by Seed Talks.
It sounds interesting.
It's between 7 and 9:30 in the evening at 2 Roxburgh Place in Edinburgh, which I assume is some sort of event location. And not someone's
I hope
house.
so, yeah.
Then, if you're in the direction of Faversham, which I'm reliably informed is a place, there is a stand-up show at the Alexander Centre, starting at 8:45 p.m. So it's getting a bit late. It's about an hour long. It's called Behavioural Problems with 2 E's, like buzzy. Behavioural Problems, something autism, by Stephen Catling. So yeah, that's happening at the Alexander Centre in Faversham on the 6th of October. Doors open at 8:30 in the evening. So ticket prices are anywhere between £5 and £6. So if you're in the Kentish direction, then feel free.
We all love a good stand-up show.
We do. Now, our final event for you today is also on the 6th of October, but handily also happens on the first Friday of the month. So every month, first Friday, it's on. So this one is in Liverpool as well. As I mentioned last week, Liverpool's very supportive of these sorts of things. So in between 5 and 7 p.m, there's an LGBTQ plus neurodivergent peer support group session going on. So this is supported by Merseyside autistic adults, but it's taking place at Sahir House, which is on Dale Street in Liverpool. So it's also free to attend. So if you're LGBTQ plus or neurodivergent, then I'm sure you are more than welcome to attend that if you should so wish. But that's all we have for you this week on the Autistic Experience. Whew, there's quite a lot going on.
There is.
We've got our thing next week to look forward to, which you will hear all about, I'm sure, next week, assuming we both survive.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So until next week, yes, you can go follow us on Instagram at The Autistic Experience. And then, of course, if there are any new stories that catch your eye, if there are any questions you want answered, or if there are any events that you're going to or organising or have near you, as long as they validate, support, and in general are decent for us ND folk, then we will more than happily give you a mention on this. But for now, though, I've been Kieran, she's been Chloe. You go get that free lunch. I want to use that as a sign-off now.
You go get that free
You
lunch.
go get that free lunch. Again, listen to last week's episode for the context.
Context is for wimps.